From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark. Rick Pluta is away this week. July 2026. We are now halfway through the year, so what better time to take stock of the first 6 months? Today, the biggest stories so far in Michigan politics. Here, as they always are, to break down their lists with us are Emily Lawler, politics editor at the Detroit Free Press, and Chad Livengood, politics editor of the Detroit News. Hi, you two.
Hey.
Okay, so you got your assignments. Looking back at the year 2026, now that we are halfway through, the biggest stories out of Lansing and Michigan politics so far. Emily, we are going to start with you. Your number one.
All right. Well, mine is a little prospective in that I think the future of the Democratic Party is something we'll know a lot about by November. In the first 6 months of the year, we've really seen, especially the U.S. Senate Democratic primary, turn into sort of a debate between sort of the moderate forces that have controlled Michigan politics for a long time and within the Democratic Party and this sort of newer progressive, in some cases like Democratic Socialist inclination that's backing more progressive candidates like Abdul El-Sayed in the U.S. Senate race against Haley Stevens, who's representative of the more moderate establishment, but also candidates like Donovan McKinney in the 13th Congressional District. And I think we've got several of those sprinkled through different districts in the state.
Chad, what do you make of that number one, the future of the Democratic Party?
That was going to be my pick as well.
Stop it. Are you serious?
Yes, I'm sorry, but this is just how it's going to be today. The framing around the notion that the progressive wing of the party this is their moment. The millennials are here. They're at the doorstep. They are kicking the boomers out, left by right in there. And so we're going to see if this really works, if they pull it off. Can Abdul El-Sayed at 41 years old essentially win the nomination and lead a pack of progressives like McKinney, Will Lawrence in the 7th district? If he can pull out a primary against two like out-of-towners who've come here with a whole bunch of foreign policy credentials. They're essentially sort of I'm talking about Matt Masden and Bridget Brink. I mean, they kind of fit the same mold that district has been used to with Alyssa Sluck and Tom Barrett, a former Army veteran, even Mike Rogers going back many years. In being a CIA or FBI, former FBI agent, law enforcement, intel. And so this district in 7th has traditionally been essentially electing hawkish moderates. And if Will Lawrence is to pull off a victory in this primary in next month, it will be really a sign that things have changed in the Democratic Party. Also, just how fashionable has democratic socialism become? And just using that term. I mean, Abdul El-Sayed is not using that term, but everyone below him in essentially this movement is. Abdul will say, I'm still a capitalist. But Will Lawrence and a few others in McKinney, they're embracing that. And we obviously had a couple of members of City Council, Detroit City Council, get elected on that platform last year. And so I think this change is probably the biggest we're seeing, and in the Senate race, I mean, it essentially swept out Mallory McMorrow. She was just not. You had to basically be on one side or the other, and you couldn't straddle some middle ground. And Mallory just couldn't find a lane to run for the U.S. Senate in, and she called it quits.
Emily, how did the Democratic Party get here?
I think after the 2024 election, there were some real questions, especially after you saw the uncommitted movement, fail to get behind Kamala Harris, maybe fail to get the face time that they wanted or the influence that they wanted within that campaign or within the party. And I think that definitely motivated a group of people. But that's not the only people I see as part of this progressive edge that's forming. I think there are people who are really mad about utility regulation and view politicians as, being beholden to these big regulatory utility companies. I think there are people who are sort of disillusioned with some of the capitalist ideals that our society has embraced for a long time. So I think there are people, looking at their personal futures and their personal prognostication for, their finances and want what they want their lives to be like, and seeing that they can't afford it and blaming it on politicians and billionaires and other groups like that. So I think there's kind of some things that have been fomenting for a while, perhaps, that are all coming to a head. And we really saw it at that Democratic convention where we were picking the Attorney General and Secretary of State and the University Board nominations. That Democratic convention really featured a lot of progressive energy, perhaps more than we've seen in any other year.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, because you both had the same number one story, which happens with you two. I guess this is what happens when you're politics editors, huh? Let's go with you, Chad Livengood. What is your second story then?
Okay, my second story, I'm going to go with the Gordie Howe Bridge. That opening the bridge, this has been 8 years in construction. I think I must have just stolen Emily's idea for the next one based on our reaction.
Right, this is audio that we're playing, but if you could see the video.
I want to say I have it written down on this list. Okay.
And Emily is showing us her receipts that she has that as well. But okay, so both of you have the same story. This is why we bring you back. You guys know your stuff. So Chad, go ahead. Gordie Howe Bridge. Let's hear from you first.
This is a monumental infrastructure project for Michigan and for Canada. This has been Canada's number one infrastructure project for 2 decades. And they finally found a governor last term, 12 years ago, or 14 years ago, rather now, in Rick Snyder, to go along with a deal to do this and to bypass the legislature, assemble all the land on both sides of the border, fight the mighty Maroon family that has gone on for decades, trying to control their internet, their monopoly for truck traffic at the Ambassador Bridge, and to finally get to the finish line. And then Donald Trump comes in and throws a big wrench into it and demands concessions. And then we finally get this deal last Friday where Canada is agreeing, okay, we will hand over some profits to the U.S. government for an economic development fund, but it's like the net profits. And once we get paid and we get our bonds, our debt paid, if that materializes. But nonetheless, July 27th is now the opening day for this bridge, much anticipated, and much relief to the people who have been fighting the bridge wars of Detroit River for a couple of decades now.
Emily?
Yeah, big reason that it made my list too. And I would point that it falls in our relevant time period of the first 6 months because it was supposed to open in June and that was pushed back. So, but famously, I think, Trump intervening in this really kind of threw a wrench in the process. I don't think a lot of people were expecting that. Of course, it caused Chad's team and my team to scrutinize some donations from the Maroons and sort of their history of political giving and giving to the Trump organization. And yeah, I think that's another one where I just didn't go quite as expected, and that's probably why it made the list.
Chad, was there anything that Governor Gretchen Whitmer could or should have done? There's such conversation about the relationship and the type of relationship that she has with this president that could have hurried this opening up.
There was efforts by the governor's administration to push this along, and back in June, they all of a sudden it came out, got leaked that, hey, they're going to have a ribbon cutting on Friday. This is like early in the week, and what we were told was the governor was in her office was directly talking to top officials in the White House to try to get this done. Then there was some other competing interests within the Trump administration that essentially kind of held things up, and that's where they had to call it off. So I think Whitmer was trying to get this off the plate, get this done with, and move on, because there's a whole lot of other things that she'd like to work on in the final 6 months in office, and so she was trying to move this along, and the Canadians have been very anxious to get this moved along and not let this get bogged down in negotiations over a new trade agreement with Trump. They've long said that these are two separate issues, but some folks, particularly the Maroons, have tried to basically tie them together because truck traffic is dictated by trade, and the truck traffic at the border is not what it used to be, especially like at the height of NAFTA in the late 90s, pre 9/11. It is a third of the number of trucks that cross every day. And there's some skepticism about whether this new bridge can fully be paid for over time, based on the fact that truck traffic has dramatically decreased in the past several decade or so.
Emily, does the bridge open at the end of July?
I think so. I mean, it seems like you wouldn't cancel that twice, but I guess knock on wood, or I guess I've made bolder predictions.
That is Emily Lawler. She is politics editor at the Detroit Free Press. Chad Livengood, politics editor at the Detroit News. We are counting down the top 3 stories so far of 2026. Let's see, Emily, you are up. Your final story.
Okay, I don't think Chad's gonna pick this one because it's more of a loose collection of thoughts that are about 75% formed under the banner, "Where's Whitmer?" Her media veil, of course, has been notoriously slim for a couple years, but, I think some other questions I have are, on the 9 bills. She let down a lot of allies that, were expecting her to sign those, and instead she did not. On endorsements, we've started to see her trickle into some like state house and Senate races, but I think there are a lot of people who would welcome her guidance on some of the marquee primaries in the state that she's stayed out of. I have not seen her PAC necessarily mobilizing to help candidates, although those campaign finance reports haven't been updated since March, so who knows? And then I would also say that, I think her policy agenda is a little bit foggy at this point. We saw her roll out her budget in February with a lot of ideas to sort of more permanently ensconce some of the priorities she's already put in place into the state budget. That didn't happen. And I'm not sure sort of where her direction goes from here.
That's a pretty good one. I have to admit, I do have a different pick, but I do think that the Whitmer issues are starting to really boil up in the Democratic Party, especially after last week's vetoes. But within some of these primaries, I mean, she's picking some folks that kind of surprised me. Abbas Alawahi, one of the leaders of the Uncommitted movement, running for the state Senate, one of the people who told people not to go vote for Joe Biden in 2024, Governor Whitmer has endorsed him over State Representative Aaron Burns. And it is a mystery about why. Burns seems to more closely fit the Gretchen Whitmer politics and policy. And so it's kind of a surprise. Aaron Burns kind of spoke out against how the governor has managed FOIA when she was trying to push for FOIA reform. And she was one of the Democrats who just kind of got upset in the last year when in 2025 or 4, when they thought that the Democrats were sitting around doing nothing, and she was kind of critical. That's just all that we sort of know publicly about how Aaron Burns has ever crossed paths or crossed swords with the governor. But it would kind of lend itself to questioning whether this is sort of a revenge endorsement, essentially, and if Whitmer's out sort of taking numbers here at the end.
And Chad, finally, your story, the end.
Okay. This is a little unconventional, but we're on a public radio station owned by the University of Michigan. So university politics, board politics, has been a full-time job to be a reporter in this state. I mean, between the fights over defunding or disinvesting in Israel at the University of Michigan board, the crimes that have allegedly been committed against trustees and administrators, from the harassment and whatnot. I mean, this has involved the attorney general, federal prosecutors, and then at East Lansing and Michigan State University, you had this stunning turn of events where the board of trustees this dysfunctional board of trustees calls a board meeting on a Sunday night while the Pistons are in Game 7 against the Cavaliers. The rest of the state is paying attention to that game, not an 8 p.m. meeting. And they vote to double the president's salary from a little over $1 million to $2 million. Then they vote to essentially put a gag order on every trustee that you can't say bad things about the policy that the rest of the board votes on, even though these are elected officials, statewide elected officials that essentially had to sign this loyalty pledge under threat of losing their tickets to Spartan football and basketball games. I mean, who could ever, the horror of that idea. And then like a week later, the president announces, Kevin Guskiewicz, he's going to leave for Clemson for about $700,000 less than he'd just been given in a pay raise. And then 40 some days later, he has a change of heart and, he's worked it out with the board and he's going to stay, and he's only going to go stay for $1.5 million and some private jet time, apparently, as one of his benefits. But nonetheless, this is like kind of a wild roller coaster of political struggles. You just can't make up some of this stuff, but the turmoil at the universities, the three elected university boards, Wayne State, Michigan State, and U of M, has been astonishing. It really has come to a head in the last 6 months.
Emily, has it kept you surprised?
Yeah, I like that Chad and I both saved our most offbeat one for last, but I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, university boards are famously, pretty quiet in terms of elected bodies. They go up for this statewide vote in the case of the Wayne State, U of M, and MSU. And they're usually not the people that we're writing about. But I do think that, to Chad's point, there have been some of the most newsworthy institutions that we cover. And a lot of the institutional decision-making there seems to tie into national trends, too. And then also just reflect a lot of, political drama that hasn't necessarily characterized those boards in years past.
Yeah, political consultants have benefited greatly from all of this. They, not only at the Democratic Party convention, they had to, got hired in order to help kind of keep people on these boards. These are unpaid positions where they had to go out and hire a consultant, pay all this money. And Jordan Acker of the University of Michigan kind of got, learned the hard way and lost his nomination even after he made all this effort and all this, spent a lot of money trying to get renominated. And then the debate continues on in the legislature about whether just to get rid of these elected boards. And I think that issue is not dead. And we could see that, if the legislature comes back in August, they could put this on the ballot for November and ask voters to abolish the elected boards of U of M, MSU, and Wayne State.
At which point we'll be talking about it as we round up our top 3 biggest stories of 2026 in December. That is Chad Livengood. He is politics editor at the Detroit News, and Emily Lawler here, politics editor at the Detroit Free Press. Higher education, a new bridge, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, the Democratic Party. You all came with receipts. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks for having us.
Always a pleasure, Zoe.
And we always want to hear from you. Got a few stories you think we missed, or just want to guess what the next big stories are going to be? Let us know. Email us at politics@michiganpublic.org. That's politics@michiganpublic.org. And that is It's Just Politics for today. I'm Zoe Clark. Rick Pluta is away this week. Let's talk again next week.